I should turn the house lights up a little bit so I can see some people. I'm Tony Kornheiser. I also work for ESPN, and I'm here tonight to present a Lifetime Achievement Award to Bill Nack for the great work he has done in sports over a long period of time. Nack and I worked together at Newsday in the 1970s. It's a long time ago. Both of us had hair at that point. And I watched, most of you here are either novelists or historians or playwrights and poets, and you probably work alone. You probably don't have people standing over you and watching everything that you do, but when you work in a sports department in Newsday or the New York Times or the Washington Post or Chicago Tribune, there's 50 people every time you go anywhere. In the office, not just in the office, but when you go out on assignment. So I watched how the sausage was made with Nack, and it was torture, absolute torture. There's never been anybody in America more singularly unfit to be a newspaper columnist daily than Bill Nack. He blew every deadline we had. We had a deadline, the first edition at 6 o'clock, gone. We had one, a long run at about 11:15 to 11:30, never made it. 1:15, 1:30, blew right through it. The last deadline was 2 o'clock in the morning, and the only person, if you didn't get the copy in by 2 o'clock in the morning, then the only person who read it was a copy editor who was angry that you didn't get the copy in. 90% of Nack's work was read by that guy. You got to see it in books and you got to see it in magazines, but Bill Nack had the reputation as sort of an absent-minded professor, partially because he left about 100 rent-a-cars in various places because he didn't remember where they were. We used to have to try to get back to Long Island from Madison Square Garden, and the last train out was maybe 2 o'clock, 2:10, and you'd wait in the elevator for Nack. You know, come on, Bill, we're going to miss the train. And he'd finally get into the elevator, and he'd put his hands in his pockets, and he'd pull out cigars. And he'd look at the cigars because he didn't smoke cigars. And he would say, Tony, what color was my coat? And I said, it's blue, Bill. And he said, well, I wore a brown coat in here. That's what he did. I'll tell you two very quick stories. One I know is true because Bill wrote about it, and one I hope is true. He was covering a long time ago in the Reggie Jackson, Billy Martin era. He was covering the Yankees. He went out to Tiger Stadium in Detroit to write a column about what was going on with them. And he wrote laboriously, and it just took a long, long time. And finally, the guy who was running the press box at Tiger Stadium said, I don't care who you are, get out of here, we're closed, get out. So Nack took his typewriter, because in those days you had typewriters, and he went out to a concession stand, and under a sign that said hot dogs that was still illuminated, he finally finished his copy, called it in at 3 o'clock to the editor who spiked it, and went home. And Nack then tried to leave Tiger Stadium. Every door was padlocked, and he couldn't get out. He was locked inside Tiger Stadium. About 4 in the morning, he's on the infield going, please, somebody help me. Please, I can't get out. That story's true. The other one that I hope is true is when you cover sports for a living, you end up going on road trips. You end up doing baseball games, and 3 games in one city, 4 in another, and you go from city to city to city. And in those days, when there actually were operators in hotels and you could call up the front desk, you would sometimes ask this question, what time is it? And you would ask that only because you didn't know what time zone you were in. Nack was chasing a fighter at one point from city to city to city. Maybe it was Ali, maybe it was Larry Holmes, maybe it was Roberto Duran, it doesn't really matter. This is what he asked the clerk at the desk. Where am I? There's a pause. Nack again. I'm not in the United States. The fact is that Nack left newspapers and he went into magazine writing and he went into book writing, and you are awarding him tonight a Lifetime Achievement Award because he really was and is that great a writer. When he wrote about horse racing, as he did so often, you could hear the hoofbeats. When he wrote about boxing, as he did so often, you could feel the jab. When he wrote about baseball, as he did so often, you could smell the leather in the glove. And when it was all done, it was this beautiful puzzle of intricate little pieces that all fit together. And people asked all the time, was it worth the wait? And the answer is, you're damn right it was worth the wait. Bill Nack.
Yeah, those are all true stories, I'm afraid. In December of 1971, I was at a Christmas party at Newsday newspaper, and I was there, and it was it was a long night, and at the urging of some of my friends, all of us were pretty well into the eggnog. I did something that that had probably never been done in the history of journalism, and it certainly changed the direction of my life, because I got up on the desk in the middle of the city room, and I recited all the Kentucky Derby winners from 1875 to the then present. You're laughing. You think it's a joke. Well, I'm going to give you a sample. Aristides, Vagrant, Baden, Daystar, Lord Murphy, Fonzo, Hindu, Apollo, Leonidas, Buchanan, Joe Cotton, Ben Ali, Montrose, Macbeth, Spokane, Raleigh, Kingman, Ezra, Lookout, Chant, Halma, Ben Brush, Typhoon II, Plaudit, Manuel, and Lieutenant Gibson. That was the 19th century. I will spare you the 20th. Upon dismounting from that table, the editor of the paper, a great editor named David Laventhal, came up to me and he said, "Why do you know that?" And I said, "David, I'm a real horse racing buff. I'm an historian of the sport. I love it for the same reasons that Damon Runyon and Red Smith love it, because of the color, the richness of the stories, the colorful characters, and I really enjoy it." And I told him, I said, it's just something that has obsessed me. And I actually took out my wallet and I showed him a picture of the 1955 Kentucky Derby winner swaps, which I carried in my wallet. And he shook his head and he said, and by the way, I had just spent 4 years covering politics in Suffolk County, Long Island. County legislature, sewers. I could sit here now and talk about tertiary treatment for an hour with you and how to remove nitrogen from sewer water. And he leaned over to me and he said, he knew I was not happy, and he said, "How would you like to be our horse racing writer?" And I said, "Voila, you're going to make my hobby my job?" And he said, "That's the idea. We need a horse racing writer, and you'd be perfect for it." I could not say yes fast enough. And he said, "Okay, fine. I want you to write me a memo and tell me why you want the job, and I will post it on the bulletin board to explain to a lot of people, so I don't have to, why you are making this unusual move." And the only thing I recall in that memo was the line, "After covering politicians for 4.5 years, I would like the chance to cover the whole horse." This was, now here it is 46 years later, and after being a columnist and then a magazine writer, I'm here to thank Penn and ESPN for this award. I want to thank my wife Carolyn for showing up tonight, and all of her patients, and my daughter Emily and son-in-law Josh, and my good friend Les Payne from Vietnam, who won a couple of Pulitzer Prizes for Newsday. We were soldiers together in Young over there. And when I went to Newsday, he was a captain, I was a lieutenant. I got out before he did, came back and went to work at Newsday, and I told the editors, "You got to hire this guy. He's down at Fort Bliss. He's a captain of the artillery, English graduate from Connecticut." And so they did, and he won a Pulitzer Prize or two and became the assistant managing editor in charge of national affairs for Newsday, and I'm proud to know him. That's Les Payne right there. Yes. Yeah. I just want to, in closing, I just want to remember Yogi Berra, who said upon being honored in his hometown of St. Louis when the Yankees made a swing through St. Louis to play the old St. Louis Browns, he was honored and he stood up and he said, "For the ages, I want to thank everyone who made this evening necessary." Thank you.